Good morning, how you doing? My name's Mark Millar, and what do I do in the building industry? Well, I was a joiner by trade, and I moved into television, and I've been making a TV program about my passion and my love, which is self-build. And I've been on Channel 5 making Build Your Dream Home in the Country. But today, I'm in Swindon with AC Architects talking about my passion, self-build. What's that all about? Well, maybe you've been living in something like this for many, many years and you're wanting to do something completely different. What are you going to do? You're going to go and buy a little house on a housing estate, or are you going to buy yourself a new flat or a new apartment? Or are you going to be really brave and go into the world of self-build? So how do you go about finding that perfect piece of land that you want to do your self-build, your dream home on? Well, there's a thing called plot search, and you can go onto plot search and find pieces of land all over the country, look at them and see whether they're going to suit you, see whether they're going to suit your building as well. Little things like what the land's going to be like, what the view's going to be like. Is it what you want to be pouring all your money into? Because you don't want to be looking on a factory wall or anything, do you? You're looking for beauty. You're looking for something to inspire you every day when you get up, and you walk out your front door, or you look out that new living room window, or you eat breakfast with this beautiful vista. If that's what you're after, go on the plot search, look what's around the country, and do lots of research. Self-build is all research on your side before you hand over to the professionals. There's lots of things about the plot that you should look out for. Whether you'll actually get planning on that. Is there things around you, or are you in an area that planning is very difficult to get in? But also look at services, what the services are that are coming into the land, because you might have a certain budget to build this property. You've got to start thinking about how you run the property on energy wise. Obviously, how you're going to get, whether it's gas, electric, all your other amenities into the property. Where's the nearest station? So things like that are really important to consider, because they could end up costing you a lot more than your budget is. So really think about those things. Services coming into the land. Also access to the land. How close are you to the road to get in there? Are you going to get permission to create a driveway from the A road, B road, whatever it happens to be, onto your piece of land? So think about all those little things before you go any further. This is such an important part of the build, is that piece of land. You might think it's in a great position, but when you look down at all the things, I don't mean to sound bad, but look at the negatives on that land. Are those negatives going to add up to costing you an absolute fortune? Can you live with it? And are you prepared to walk away? Because you need to be able to walk away. You might end up looking at numerous pieces of land, plots all over the country, but be prepared to walk away if it's not suitable. We dream of this perfect property that we're after, and the perfect view and stuff. Maybe the piece of land that you've seen that has everything else, has all the positives going for it, is correct, right for you. That's when you've got to hand over to your architects and speak with them and start getting creative and what can be done on that land, because there's so much out there that can be done. We think inside our own little world. Talk to other people and see what's in their world, and let's get the imagination going. Let's get creative. So there is a piece of land you might think isn't correct for what you want to build, but speak to somebody else along the line, the architect that you're going to get involved. So you're brave enough to take the step to go into self-build, but where do you actually start? You've found the piece of land, you've gone through that sort of process. How do you finance it? Because a self-build mortgage is very different to a normal mortgage. Self-build mortgage works in payments, where in stage payments as you go through the build. So you have to budget really well. And if you're not good at budgeting, you need to learn. You need to stay on top of this, because self-build is all about really good planning. So where do we go? We go to a company like this here that we can talk to, and who specialize in self-build mortgages. And that's the way forward. One of the things that in good old Blighty that keeps knocking us back is actually weather conditions. As I said earlier, the payments are in stage payments as you go through the build. So you're going to come up out of the ground, you've got to get your foundations, whatever they happen to be, whether it's a raft, whether it's piles, whatever is strip foundation. You've got to work on all that system, but the weather can hold you back so much. Because you might be able to come out off your foundation with your blocks to bring you up the damp-proof course. That can be held up. All the planning that holds it down, and you've got to collect this money at a certain point so that you can move on to the next stage of the build. So there's things like weather. That's one of the things that can disturb your budgeting. The other thing is your trades, whether they're actually going to be there on the day they say they're going to be there. And that's one thing that can really trip you up on a self-build. That part of the planning has to be absolutely spot on. Now, when it comes to the trades, there's certain trades actually just can't work in certain weather conditions. So what do? You sit back and you start panicking slightly, but you'll get through it. There's always a positive, but you've got to remember that the money comes in stages and you've got to reach those stages. So you've got to look at all the things that could trip you up on the way. There's even materials, delivery of materials, whether you're going to be able to get the particular material that you want on time. It could be something that's coming from Europe into here, especially in self-build. The self-build is going to be very high end. You're going to build that house that's going to be your home for a very long time, and you want to build it as best you can. So you're at the point, you've found your piece of land, you're happy with it, you know what you want to do with it, but you're not quite sure what you want to build. You've got a little picture in your head. So how do you make that picture in your head become reality? Bring your architect on board. This is where they step in. This is where between you and them, you build a relationship. And that's the time when you start getting really creative, with what's in your head, what they have professionally, and also their skills. Get them together and then think of just the home you want to build and whether you can do it in your budget. You're going to need the architects on board. You're going to need a QS on board as well to price everything out for you. But the first thing you need to do, now that you've got your architect on board, is start looking at planning, right? Are you going to get the planning permission for the house that you want, or are you going to have to move the goalposts slightly so to keep them happy as well? And you'll get all that help with working alongside your architect, especially if you're in the trade and you're building a property that you think you know everything about that trade. But you've got to find an architect to work with that you really trust and have faith in, because they do know the things that are going to hold you up. They do know that what's going to get knocked back in planning. You've got to take their advice through the build. And be a little bit humble about it. I'm a tradesperson myself, and I know when I'm on site, the way I want things to be done and how I want to approach them. But when you're self-building, you need to surround yourself by professionals and take their advice. So you found your piece of land, you've got your architect on board, you've got everything up and running, you've put in for your planning. How much is this all going to cost you? The days of working out in the back of a fag packet have all gone. Bring in a high quality, well-recommended QS. That's a quantity surveyor to get all those prices nailed down. What's the point in having these great plans and great ideas and you actually can't achieve it financially? So you find that perfect plot of land and everything's going really well, your dream's moving in the right direction. What's under the ground? That's something you really need to ask yourself. We've got different soil conditions. You could be building on rock, you could be building on sand, you could be in clay. So what are we doing? How is it going to affect the price of coming out of the ground? So we need to get a survey done on the land, so an SI inspection, to make sure that we actually can build on that piece of land. And if we can build on that land, how we build on that land. And you'll get all that from the information that the survey will give you and dealing with your architect. So you've got to the point now, you've had your soil inspection done. So what type of foundations do we use? Well, really, there's about 3 or 4 that we use in the UK. And this here is a raft foundation. And then we've got the strip foundation, concrete strip foundation. That's another one that we can use. And then we've got these. These are a concrete pile foundation. So this is why it's so important to find out what's under the ground. So you're at that point now where you're thinking about design and specification and what you actually want to build and how you want to build it. You know, there's lots of things out there. We've got timber frame, we've got SIP systems, we've got ICF. There's so much. There's traditional block and brick. So where do we go? So how do you actually make that choice? You know, well, one, I would actually work very closely with the architect about it. But what also do you want when it comes to, say, you want to be very environmentally friendly? You want this home to be very environmentally friendly? Do you want a very high level of insulation, which we all do because we want to bring the U value of the property as low as possible? And a U value basically is a piece of a measurement of per meter square of how much heat is lost through that material in a meter square. So timber frame are really well insulated. A SIPS panel is totally insulated, which is basically insulation that is injected between two boards. We've got a traditional block and build style, which is our concrete block on the inside, our thermalite block on the inside, our insulation, and our brick exterior. They all have different levels of thermal value. So for me, I think it's really important, especially if you're building that new home, that you work with the best thermal value you can actually achieve. So how do you understand this is working once again back to your architect. I talked earlier about here in good old UK, you know, we have so many changes in weather and what's going on and stuff. And that's all something that you need to really consider when you're building. So if you, for example, building a block and brick build, you know, how is that going to be affected time-wise if the weather comes in? To tell you the truth, it's going to be terrible because you're going to be coming up, the weather's going to be changing. If you've got wet weather or even if you've got really cold weather, you cannot build. So everything's going to be holding you up in those things. The beauty about a SIPS build, that SIPS build is going to go up so quickly and be closed off to the weather so quickly that even if things are bad on the outside, you can still carry on with work on the inside. And listen, time is money on a self-build. There's going to be different people looking at this here with different skill levels about building the property. Obviously, if you're in the industry, you know what you're doing. I've had electricians building their self-build, you know, who know everything about the electrics and they have to find out about the plastering, the insulation, all the other things. But all this extra training takes time. And honestly, in the UK, we're battling against the weather. You want to get that building up and you want to get it weather tight as soon as possible. So think about what you've got in your budget. Think about who you're going to bring in. If you are bringing a block and build in, have the bricklayers do it. You know, get the trades in to do it. If you're going to do a SIPS building, you know, that SIPS building could be supplied with a fitting team. Take that on as well. Get the building up as quickly as you can and get the inside dry. Know your skill set and stick to it. So what sort of windows do you want to put into your property? We've actually got a choice. You can have timber. You've got aluminium clad timber windows. You've got the full aluminium window. Or you can choose UPVC. So you've got this choice of windows that we've just gone through. What's the pros and cons when it comes to them? Well, timber windows, obviously very beautiful, very sustainable. In your property, they're going to take a lot of maintenance. They're going to get battered with the weather, the paint's going to flake, you're going to have to stay on top of them to keep them in tip-top condition. So it's more work. And I always feel when you get to the point in a self-built, you've built it, you want to live in it. So timber windows is going to take a lot of maintenance. UPVC windows, the disadvantage for me with the UPVC window is that the section is quite a large section. So you're getting quite a large section of UPVC, which means less glass, less light. They're very good when it comes to U values. They have their positives as well. Aluminium windows, they come with a very small sight line, which means the profile itself is much smaller than even the timber windows, which means more glass, more light. They're thermally broken, and they've also got a great U value on the units as well. And then you can have the mix of aluminium and wood together. But there's so much out there that we can look at. But I think when you're building it, when you're going into self-build, you want the best materials. You're investing not just money in this property, you're investing your lifestyle. All the different windows that we've talked about all will come with a different price range and stuff as well. But I'd also like to mention, but if you're actually building in a conservation area, there is conservation windows that you will have to work with, which are very beautiful as well. But you have to look at where you're building and how that can affect the cost of that property as well. Because a conservation window is going to be more expensive than your standard off-the-shelf aluminium, UPVC, or timber window. So it's another thing you've got to consider. I love this program. It's my favorite. I just want to talk a little bit about exterior finishes and what options are on the market. At the moment, we've got this beautiful brick building behind us here, but we can also work in brick slips, which is basically the face of a brick that has been sliced down and then hung on a system on the outside of the building. Quite often, there's the question about, if we were using timber on the outside of the building, do we have to have a timber frame building or whatever? No, you don't. It can be fixed in different methods on the outside of the building. So you see a lot of properties going up now with cedar and larch finishes on the outside, maybe a black timber on the outside as well. We've got stone cladding, we've got composite cladding that can go on the outsides of buildings as well. There's many, many things out there. But with talking with your architect and coming up, producing that, taking all that information in your head and getting it out onto the table and looking around you at your environment, what you actually want to build. Is it going to sit in those surroundings well? And this is another time when you need to come in and talk to your architect about those specific points. It's really important. There's so many beautiful finishes out there. So shop around and talk. So you've got to this point, you've decided to do a self-build. I've just touched on a couple of tiny little bits in the whole system, but this time is a time when you can really put everything into this home, because this is your dream home. You're building it from the ground up with the help of professionals, so make it the best you can. Think about everything green energy wise. You're building a house that is not going to leak energy, so you also want to build one that's going to produce energy as well. So you can look at solar, you can look at air source heat pumps, you can ground source heat pumps if the land allows for it. There's so many things you can do. It might cost that little bit more at the start, but as time goes on, that's going to pay back. And what a good thing to do for the environment. It's really worth doing. There's the Self-Build and Renovation Centre, which is where we are now. And it's got a show on the 10th and the 11th of October. So any information that you're going to need or want to know, you can come and get it here. Come and meet AC Architects or Tim Phillips, who's a fantastic QS, and come in and speak to the many professionals that are here who are going to point you in the right direction. This is such a great place to start. I'd like to give you a couple of my little tips when it comes to actually when you're on site, because as the build's going on, I have seen with my TV program, Build Your Dream Home in the Country, many, many families changing direction during the build, tweaking the design, pulling things out of one room into another room or making a window bigger. When you make the decisions with your architect and you've sat down and you're really sure the planning's right, tick it off and don't move the goalposts, because all it does is cost you money. Sit there for a while, look at those plans, look at those designs, go through everything, because you will waste so much money if you change anything. Also, being on site is very important, that you actually go on site as well, and that if you're not actually building it yourself, that you're communicating with your contractor, with your architect, that you know everything that's going on. Build a good relationship with them and make sure there's communication. Every week, every few days, you should know where you want to be by Friday, and what's going to be starting on the Monday, that you've planned ahead and that the contractor knows exactly what they're doing, but also that they've got all the materials they need. Don't have them standing around waiting for stuff. They want to be looking at it, not looking for it. That's another way to waste a lot of money. So it's all about really good planning, because if you're going to be part of that self-build, which you will be, you'll want to be involved and you'll want to communicate, you'll want to build that relationship, because this is a very special thing to do, is to self-build. So communication, really good planning, don't move the goalposts, and good luck.